Hello, everybody. Welcome to week number 3 of the Pauper Premier League, brought to you guys by Cool Stuff Inc. and sponsored as well by Wizards of the Coast. I'm Kendra Smith, aka the Maverick Girl, and with me we got.
Hey everyone, it's Alex again. How you doing?
All right, so we've got a bunch of really sweet matchups this week, Alex. How do you think about all this?
So yeah, this week's a little different. We're seeing, I saw some people describe it as 3 decks from Pauper's past versus Pauper's present. And that's actually a really good way to think about this. So we have Brian DeMars, longtime grinder, longtime content creator. He's playing his version of Mono Black Control. And so Mono Black Control is one of these it's been around for a very long time in Pauper, really one of the early best decks, and then kind of went away. Then it came back when Grey Merchant of Asphodel got printed. But really, since the advent of, the ancestor of Adam Yurchik's deck, basically a Core Skyfisher value deck, it's kind of been pushed to that second, sometimes third tier.
Yeah, between that
yeah, go
and
ahead.
Tron, obviously.
Yeah, Tron's also a big one. But no Tron, again, we somehow made it through 3 weeks and 12 decks without seeing one piece of Urza, which we'll see if that lasts. I doubt it highly. But speaking of Pauper's past, we have Adam Yurchik on Pauper's present, and it's this 3-color Core Skyfisher Arkham's Astrolabe value deck. So, Kendra, I know you have some thoughts on Arkham's Astrolabe. You weren't in the booth with me and Brian Bovo last week, but let's hear your thoughts.
So, I actually think that Arkham's Astrolabe may be causing some slight issues. It remains to be seen just yet. We are only about a month and a half out from Modern Horizons being released. So we still have a lot of room for the format to grow and evolve and so on and so forth. So but the problem that we're kind of seeing, at least from my standpoint, is that the format, a lot of the decks are starting to look kind of samey.
Yeah.
They do different things. There's one that's like, hey, this is a Pestilence deck. Hey, this one is a Flicker deck. And this one is a mid-range deck. But they all kind of have a lot of 40, 50 cards similar, and then the rest are just kind of alternated a little bit. But again, remains to be seen. But Adam's deck in particular is the more Jeskai mid-range oriented build, kind of like an evolution, so to speak, of the Boros Monarch list that we used to see. Obviously, Boros still exists. We saw that last week with Ricardo. But it's more of an evolution of that. We've now seen Pal Sentinels go away, but we're still seeing the, Core Skyfisher, Glint Hawk. Here's your removal spells, your bolts, your screds. And then it also runs the likes of Muldrifter, Archaeomancer, and Ephemerate, so you can get value by flickering around your creatures.
So you probably remember, I don't know how many of our viewers remember, but before Boros Monarch, and really before Thraben Inspector, there was this deck it was a Jeskai midrange deck, and went by the nickname of Kitty.
We did call it Jeskai Kadoltha or Kadoltha Jeskai, which then turned into Kadoltha Boros, which then turned into Boros Monarch.
So Kadoltha came from the name. So before Alchemist's Vial, the deck would often run Ichor Wellspring and Kadoltha Rebirth to generate goblins. But this was your typical value deck. And the earliest versions leaned they didn't lean on Muldrifter, but the early successful ones really did. And so what you're seeing here is kind of a return to that, except now with this Archaeomancer Ephemerate package. And because of Arkham's Astrolabe on really turn 1, you're able to get away with running Counterspell. So it's really kind of nice to see this deck kind of come full circle. I agree with you. You can start to see some subtle differences in the decks, but when they all kind of start with 4 Core Skyfisher, 4 Arkham's Astrolabe, or something thereabout. Like there's Astrolabe, and then there's at least 4 other creatures that synergize with it, whether it's Core Skyfisher, whether it's Trinket Mage. Adam here, it looks like 10. And that doesn't count the Seeker of the Way, which gets triggered off of Astrolabe. But we'll have at least 3 rounds to talk about this deck. Let's talk about what Chris Van Meter is running. Burn.
Yeah, good old Burn. It is, I believe our friends at Color Commentary have dubbed it the most okayest deck in the format at any given point in time. And I think that's a pretty fair assessment. It's a deck that'll either get just, burned out really easily, or it'll actually be the one burning out the opponents very easily. And there really isn't a middle ground. It wins hard or it loses hard.
Yeah, so the deck's gotten a couple new tools as of late. It's gotten Give 2 Lava Runner out of Dominaria. That card's not as good as it was before the ban of Gitaxian Probe. So start opening on Gitaxian Probe and Lightning Bolt, or anything really, would really let Give 2 Lava Runner do its best Goblin Guide impression. You know, when this card was spoiled, it kind of got the moniker Garbage Guide.
Yes, Garbo Guide.
Garbo Guide. It's really quite good. But it also got Skewer the Critics. And that card's been great, you know, with Thermo Alchemist, which really sent this deck from kind of that tier 1.5, tier 2 to tier, probably not tier 1, but definitely a competitive deck.
Yeah, tier 1.5 maybe-ish.
Yeah.
Pretty close. I am seeing a few people mentioning Weather the Storm. Now, I will say this particular week, Chris actually chose pretty well. Brian and Emma are both running monocolor decks, mono black in Brian's end and mono blue for Emma. So as a result, we're not actually going to see any Weather the Storms from them.
No, and Weather the Storm is this card that has kind of like it's the specter over the format of can you win before Weather the Storm does its job. I will say that Burn is probably one of the best positioned red decks to go up against Weather the Storm, because it can just hold all its burn cards until the other player puts Weather the Storm on the stack, and then at that point, it can resolve its instant. That remains to be seen whether or not it's good enough, but we will see it. We won't see it this week, unfortunately. But let's talk about, what used to be one of the consensus best decks and now has kind of taken a hit, Emma's Delver.
Yeah. So this is actually really interesting. Now, I've taken a look at her list here. And for those at home here, I will drop a link to the deck list right here, right now. And what we've actually got with Emma's list is a little bit of what we used to see standard. Mono blue Delver. It's got you got your Delver, you've got your Fairy Miscreants, your Ninja, your Spell Stutter. And you got your Vapor Snag, you got some counter spells, and you got your snaps. Those were pretty standard for a while. But what it is running a lot more of is it's running like the mutagenic growths, which was a little bit of tech we saw for a little while. And it's also running a Bone Splitter. Now, that comes and goes from the Delver lists. I know when I first actually picked up Delver for the very first time, Delver was one of my very first decks when I got serious into Pauper. And I actually did run one of Bone Splitter. So these decks do show up quite a bit, but it's running some interesting tech here. It's running Fairy Seer, new card from Modern Horizons. So that really almost puts us in less of a Delver and more of a Fairies deck.
Yeah, there are some other noticeable changes. Emma's not running any Spire Golem, and Spire Golem kind of was the traditional top end of Delver before Augur of Bolus. But no Augur of Bolus either. The big thing is the sideboard. There's some really interesting cards in the sideboard.
I'm really excited about this.
Sunken City.
Sunken City is great.
For those of you who don't know, it's an enchantment for blue. Same cost as Counterspell, but it gives all blue creatures +1/+1. So it's like Crusade. It's a symmetrical effect. So in a Delver Mirror, it'd give my creatures and Kendra's creatures both +1/+1.
Yeah.
Thing is, unlike Crusade, which just costs white, Sunken City has an upkeep cost of blue. So if Emma decides that she wants to keep this around, it's going to cost her 2 mana every upkeep.
Right.
And that can be a big deal because Delver is a mana-hungry deck. And unlike versions that might have a Spire Golem, Emma's threats cost mana. There are going to be some neat tricks she might be able to pull by snapping something during her upkeep, untapping the lands, then tapping them if she really wants to do something on her turn. But that is really about it. So Our first... Go ahead.
But I do think that Sunken City is very effective, especially in this particular meta. I will say that right now. In the greater meta, it's a little bit of a risk. But right now, when you have your matchups are literally just Mono Black Delver, or I'm sorry, Mono Black Control.
Mono Black Control.
Yeah.
I'd love to play Mono Black Delver. That'd be my
right?
favorite deck.
Mono Red Burn, and then Jeskai mid-range. But the Jeskai mid-range, the only blue creatures in there really are Muldrifter. So
Trinket Mage and Archaeomancer are blue.
Okay, sure. I did kind of forget about this for a second. But at the end of the day, you're going to be able to get in a lot more effectively against at least two of these matchups with that Sunken City tech. So I think it's actually pretty good for this particular meta game.
So let's actually talk about our first match, which is Emma on Delver versus Brian on... So a few things. Brian DeMars is going to be playing the first 3 matches tonight. So for those of you who don't know, Brian is in Barcelona right now, and in, I don't know, 9 hours? Not very many hours, he's going to be competing in the Mythic Championship.
Yeah.
Also competing is Week 1 competitor Michael Bunda. So good luck to both of them. But Brian, bless him, has decided that he is going to play this, maybe catch a couple hours of sleep, and then go draft some Modern Horizons. So Brian, first of all, thank you and good luck. But so you're going to see 3 rounds of Brian. He's going to play all the other competitors. He's not going to be doing commentary tonight. Everyone else will be, but not this week for Brian.
Right. So because of that, Brian and some other time zone issues, obviously Emma is in England herself. Things look a little bit less shuffled. If we could maybe bring up the matches here, Rich, and we can get ourselves set up here. So as you can see, things are a little less shuffled up. Like we normally try and get a good mix between everybody here, and here you can see 3 matches straight with Brian, 2 straight with Emma. And so we're doing this a little less shuffled up, but we're making it work here. And I'm very excited. We're still going to see all these exciting matches, and it's going to be fantastic. So, so we've got Brian versus Emma first. And so we got Mono Black versus Mono Blue. What do you think?
So this is interesting. You know, traditionally, this has been not a super lopsided matchup. It's kind of hinged on a few key cards. And a lot of them are present, but not all of them. So one card that is present is Kumbaj Witches. This is a black for a 1/3 that can tap, deal 1 damage to target any target, but then that target's controller gets to choose to deal 1 damage to anything else. So this is really, really good at picking off Spellstar Sprite, Fairy Miscreant, Unflipped Delver of Secrets. On the other hand, what Emma is missing something in her sideboard that's really important in this matchup.
Yeah.
Stormbound Geist, which is 1 blue for a 2/2 with Undying. It can't block non-flyers. So what that means is, and we're trying to get us back up on screen. We're having a little technical difficulty there. There we go. So what that means is that Brian's Chainer's Edict are going to be much better.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Brian's missing a different trump in this matchup, which is Pestilence. Pestilence is this really important card that once it sticks on the board, it can be very hard for Mono Blue to remove unless it gets rid of all its creatures and all of Mono Black's creatures. So both of them are missing these kind of key trump cards in the matchup. So what's going to happen? You know, to me, it comes down to a few things. Will Brian have an early Witches, and will Emma have an answer for that? Post-board, Emma looks like Emma's going to be leaning really hard on that Moonblade Shinobi to generate token. If she can do that and hit a couple times to kind of flood the board and get around edicts, I think it's going to be a little easier for her. That being said, I know traditionally this has been a matchup that favors Mono Blue without Pestilence. I don't know. Emma's creatures are small, and Brian has a couple board wipes. So I could see this going either way. I think if I had to, I'm going, in my heart, I want Mono Black to win, but I think Emma's slightly advantaged. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think Emma is a little bit more advantaged, but I think it also is going to come down to the removal wars. Obviously, we have a bunch of fairies here, but Spellstutter Sprite. So you might see, like, I don't know, let's say there's a Fairy Seer on the board. Emma tries to attack with it. Brian tries to remove it. And there's like a Spellstutter Sprite that comes down. He could, if he has enough removal, he could like go throw extra removal at it. Obviously, then he's 3 for 2ing himself basically. But there is like a lot of play back and forth there with those removal options.
Yeah,
that really could turn the tide with a lot of things in an unexpected manner.
Yeah, this will be interesting. I'm really excited to see if Jesse and the Thief does any work. I'm a huge fan of that card. It's Ophidian Plus. And it sounds like we're ready. So we're going to see some magic. Let's go.
Heck yeah. All this Pauper action. Let's go. Let's go down to the booth.